Hello, this is Rich Portlands from Edgate, and today I'm really excited because we're with Conni Francini from Clarity Consulting, and we're going to be talking about accelerating into the education marketplace, specifically for edtech companies, because I know there's a lot of change going on out there in the space. Connie has over 20 years experience. She was a classroom teacher. She worked on PD, and she started Clarity Consulting over 4 years ago because she saw that there was a real need. And as someone who's been there and done that, she has a lot to offer her clients, and she's been an especially wonderful resource for us at Edgate. So I'm super happy to welcome Connie.
Thanks for having me, Rich. I'm excited to have this conversation together. It'll be fun.
Me too. Thank you so much. So I guess we're going to just kick off into a couple questions. The first thing I want to ask you, Connie, is talking about the landscape and some of the ways that things are changing in K-12, because that's going to help to affect change. And so if the edtech company doesn't understand all these changes that are happening, they might not be up to speed, right? So from your point of view, what are those things that are changing?
Well, I think one of the things that folks are talking about a lot is the upcoming end of ESSER funding, right? Which is creating a lot of uncertainty, not only for edtech companies on the funding side, but also within schools and districts, as far as what kind of money they're going to have, what they're going to be able to invest in, and recognizing that just as much as that funding is coming to an end, the challenges that we face in education and classrooms haven't changed, right? Those aren't going away just because the funding is going away. And after COVID, we probably have some of those challenges that were there before are really only amplified, right? Coming over those challenges. So it is a really different time in education than before COVID, not just because of COVID, but because of the sort of the wave of changes that have happened culturally and economically. But again, a lot of those same challenges that that I saw as a classroom teacher are still there, still existing, and there are still challenges with literacy and reading. There are still major challenges with math. Things like teacher retention and burnout are huge. Districts are faced with a real teacher shortage. How do you do anything when you don't have teachers in your classrooms, right? So there's this whole landscape that I think is really important for edtech companies, especially who might come from outside of education, for them to really deeply understand that those very significant challenges exist today, because that definitely plays into everything else that goes on day to day and any decisions that might be made for investing in new products and resources.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I was reading an article from Digital Promise, and they were talking about building a list of approved products, so a certification process, and I thought that was really a smart thing to do on Digital Promises from their point of view. But for the educators, my experience, back 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I worked at a K-12. It was a private high school, and I served on the Connecticut Association of Independent Schools Technology Commission. The important thing about the commission was it was an aggregate of all of us technologists, and I was actually the only marketer on the panel, which was interesting. But they created a sense of kind of understanding of what these technology shifts were occurring, what products were coming in that were worthwhile. And so they made recommendations to the rest of the schools. And I found at that point that the educators were very much had a follower's mentality. If someone else approved it, and if they thought it was legitimate, then they would say, okay, we'll give it a try. They were not going to be that early adopter, which a lot of the ed tech companies, right, and the founders, they're early adopters. They're out there trying new things. Their clients are not in this space. What's your perception of that?
I had this almost, it's so funny that you shared that. I had almost this exact conversation with an edtech founder earlier this week.
Oh, interesting.
Who said, we have this great solution, right? Super innovative, really gets at the heart of solving a major literacy problem. But what the founder told me was, it's so hard to get districts and schools to take us on because we're not yet proven, right? I mean, she's like, we see it in the work that we've done, but because we haven't sort of reached that broad market validation, it's risky to take something new. They would almost rather stick with something that's sort of known, right? And it is kind of having worked in schools and districts. I worked in LA Unified, one of the biggest school districts in the United States.
Yeah.
The education system is really not set up for major innovation. This is not really what they're looking for. They're looking for something that's reliable. They're looking for something that's proven. They're looking for something that a nearby district with a similar, student profile or, community profile is very similar, that's had good results with something, right? They're not looking for the next edgiest, off the charts idea. They're looking for something they can count on. And that's really, in opposition to what most edtech founders and companies are really all about, right? They're typically about innovation and what's new, and we're cutting edge and we're bleeding edge. Not all, but a lot of them are really out there to be major innovators. And so those two are often at odds. And I think that's something that's important for edtech founders to understand, where their audience really is in terms of innovation and figuring out how to bridge that gap, right? There's nothing wrong with being innovative as long as that innovation brings about good outcomes, right? That are actually needed by schools and districts. As long as that outcome is something that's a priority that they want to invest in, then that innovation is great. But the idea of innovation in and of itself, isn't necessarily the draw. They're looking for, we have these challenges and we need something we can reliably count on to help us solve them, and not just the something. They're also looking for, that real partnership in companies to implement something successfully, because that's a whole aspect in and of itself, is making sure that we can implement a solution effectively. So I do think there's a real point there about having that validation and really kind of showing all of the ways that that we solve a problem, we create this kind of outcome, or we make it easy for them to know that the product we've developed is going to add value, to the school. So, standards alignment is one of those, right? If we're not showing them, hey, you're going to invest in this resource, but we didn't really know whether it's aligned to standards or not, and it's for instructional use in the classroom, that's going to make it difficult for a decision maker in a school or district to invest in that solution.
Yeah, it led me to think about anchor points. Standards alignment is one of those anchor points. It's not the sexiest thing, but it's an anchor for knowing that it's a validation of the content that you're delivering is accepted within the system, and that's the same thing with what Digital Promise is trying to do with the credentialing. I think the RFP process and following the protocols that schools put out there for knowing that your product is on the list and has been vetted to some extent. Sometimes those are tedious things to do, but they build assurance for the educator and for their team. So if I'm an ed tech company, I think those are kind of three different avenues that provide that assurance for my end user, my client. Is okay, well, is the content is well aligned? Is the product on their roadmap, or is it validated through their tech department? And do I have some kind of certification or credential in order to be kind of accepted more broadly, so I know it's accepted by my peers, right?
I definitely agree. I think there's a couple things that I've heard at conferences and keeping an eye on articles and trends in journals and in conversations with folks. And I would say over the last year, I've heard a lot about results and reviews and recommendations. I think that plays a big part of it. I think what you're talking about there with the Digital Promise and that speaks to that desire for decision makers to be able to see with confidence before they make a buying decision that the resource can actually deliver results. And it doesn't need to be, you've grown for reading grade levels in reading. I mean, it could be, teacher confidence. It could be student engagement in class. It could be, some rating from, parents about their involvement with the school, or their confidence in being able to feel like part of the community. Whatever that is, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be some dramatic academic change, but there really needs to be some results. And just importantly, there needs to be some reviews and recommendations, whether those are from entities who are broadly out there in the market or from customers who have used it successfully, who can speak to that directly. That certainly lends a lot to the validity piece.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. So all of this, kind of looking at at that landscape and understanding what the opportunities are to validate. What do you think that all means for the edtech company? How can they make some change in order to be to speed up their time to market? If looking at February 2024, I want to accelerate a little bit. What do you see those opportunities are?
I think about some of the conversations I've had with edtech founders in recent months, and I think one way to go is to make sure that they're really having a focused strategy in where they're selling, right? So being a newer edtech company and trying to sell in all 50 states in the U.S. it's not feasible, right? It doesn't mean that you can't sell if someone reaches out to you, but I think having more of a focus is really important, because that enables you then to meet the needs and the requirements of customers in a particular region or specific states that you might have kind of identified as focus areas. So for example, I was talking with some executives at a tech company recently, and their product is sort of well suited for certain states, right? So as they're talking about this new offering they want to develop, one of the things that we talked about was, okay, so if you're going to develop this new solution, you are probably best suited for these states. Then you want to look at the standards in the states, and you want to make sure that you're aligned to those. Don't try to do all of them, because you're not really going to focus there, but make sure that you really deeply know those states, those standards. You can speak to the particular challenges in those states, and that makes them hopefully better able to understand the market, really speak to those needs, and then make sure they're really communicating the value and checking the boxes that are needed. Like, do you have standards alignment for our state? Right? Because if you're going to sell in a certain state, say for California, for example, where I'm located, they're going to want to see their state standards alignment, right? They're not going to want to see something sort of broad and generic. So I think that focus is really important. I think that's one. Another challenge that I see often is edtech founders not getting out into classrooms. When we talk about how well do you know the market, there's market trends and there's funding and standards and frameworks and things like that. I think it's just as important for them to really be in classrooms and on campus and even walking the halls of a district office building, so that they can really stay in tune with what they're talking about, what's important to them. Again, find out what requirements they might have. If they're talking about something like digital promise for some other product that they've invested in, those opportunities I think are just really priceless to help figure out what the hurdles are that we haven't solved for yet, right? Because our customers will tell us, especially educators will tell you. They want to teach, so they're happy to teach and share and tell you, what you can do differently and better. And that's a good thing. We should listen to them if that's our target market. So I think those are probably two of the most common challenges that I come across.
We've been hearing a lot about these third-party reviews, which are a real burden to edtech companies, having to go through and after they align, making sure someone else validates it. So I know the Edgate team has really put a focus on expediting that process. So we built a really great process for bringing someone through quickly, efficiently, delivering the documentation. So some of the team members have delved into each of the state's requirements. They've done some of that background work that I would recommend to an edtech company if you didn't have, a resource like Edgate to make sure you understood the groups that you needed to be part of, or the nonprofits or the associations that you should align with within each of the states. Because I agree that building that channel focus is super important. So if you're focusing on a state and you're digging deep and you need to know those associations and so forth, and if you do need third-party review, to have that process down so you can get there quickly, because the quicker you get to the market, obviously the quicker you can get to revenue, which for a startup is critical.
Right. And if that, having that documentation, having that evaluation is a key box requirement, checking the box on the list, if that's a key requirement, then why wouldn't you do it? Why would we want to keep that as a barrier? And oftentimes it's not just one customer who would be looking for that. Can be a really, really high value sales tool. And we don't want to do anything that's going to inhibit that sales process. So if it is a requirement, the board's going to want to see, doing it sooner rather than later is great. And I think that's something, what you brought up is something that maybe a lot of ed tech founders don't know about, is all the resources that are out there in the market who you kind of help with these kind of other areas of helping a product to be market successful. They may not have the capabilities and the expertise within their team, and that's okay. They probably don't want to have to hire for it, so they can look outside to some of the resources out here in the market who know it, can do it well, can do it accurately, can do it fast, and be able to again help them check that box and keep those sales conversations moving along.
Well, certainly that's where having folks like yourself who have market experience comes to bear. Understanding who the players are, who the associations are, in order to speed that time to market. I imagine with your experience both in the classroom and as a consultant, you've run across and built some of those alliances yourself.
Yeah, I think having those great trusted partners. I mean, I worked for about 14 years at an education solution company, creating curriculum products and professional development and ed tech resources. So I think it's really important to know that there is a network of expertise out there. You can't be all things. Even in a much larger organization, you can't have all of those capabilities internally, and having great partners really, really matters. Actually, finding good partners was one of the most challenging aspects of my role, being at an educational solutions provider, because there are some folks out there who maybe don't have the real market expertise. It was really important for me and for my team to make sure that we partnered with folks who deeply understood the market, who really, really, really cared about quality, because it mattered, as we're developing our products were our babies, and it mattered to us, how they came out in the end. We wanted to be able to develop something that we, especially those of us who were former classroom teachers like myself, would have used back in our classrooms. Again, if we were back in the classroom, we would say, yeah, we would choose to use this in the classroom because this actually works and makes a difference. And so we wanted the same kind of level of integrity and ownership in the partners that we worked with. So we actually worked with a pretty small handful. EdGate was one of them at the time, and it makes a big difference when you've got some great resources on your team, externally on your team, who can help really advance the organization. That's priceless. You can't get there on your own. So. I started up in edtech 10 years ago, so I've been down that pathway, and the cost to benefit ratio when you're talking about some of this stuff, I had the mentality, and it's hard to get out of it, that geez, I just can't spend that money, or I don't want to spend that money because it doesn't seem like it's going to be directly product related. However, I'll say to all you ed tech founders, and getting the right resources and someone who can accelerate you into the market quicker is invaluable within education, because it's such a hard market to break into. There's so much red tape, and then trust is incredibly important. So having those resources is really critical. It is. The trust piece is so important, and we see that a lot in decision makers at schools and districts. This is as I tell people, the education industry is super different, and we're not selling a widget, and we're not looking on Amazon for the thing with the lowest price and the fastest shipping or the cheapest shipping cost, and that's not how it works in education. Education, that's selling solutions, in particular ed tech solutions, more so than maybe a more traditional curriculum resource. It really is about trust. That is a tremendously important thing for ed tech founders to understand. And so that plays into the quality of what you're developing. How authentically does it really work in the classroom? Is this really going to work in kindergarten? Because a kindergarten class is different from middle school. And if you don't understand the difference between those, and your solution doesn't really address those differences, it's just not going to, it's not going to work. So I think that speaks to the importance of having other folks, kind of as part of that extended team, who you can trust to deliver quality that's accurate and that really truly meets the requirements and the needs of our customers, because their trust is everything, right? We want to help make their lives, I like to say, we want to be the easy button. Let's make their lives easier.
Yes.
So if it feels risky to invest in your ed tech product, how do we make it easier for them? Right? Yeah. What are the things we can do that eases that sense of stress and burden for them? And let's go do those things and kind of get that hurdle out of the way for them.
That's great advice. It really, it resonates. I wish I knew that 10 years ago. The next question I have, we talk about the things that they can do now, but what about in the future? Are there things that edtech companies can do to future-proof themselves in this marketplace? Because it is a volatile marketplace. It's ever changing.
It's evolving a lot. I think with the way the education landscape is today, I think it's really, really important for edtech companies to understand the priorities and those big challenges, and know that is what's top of mind, and to do what they can. We're not trying to lie and say something does something that it doesn't, but to really do what they can to maybe evolve their product in some way, or maybe even change how they talk about their solution, and even in implementation and support, making sure that you're really addressing some of those common challenges, right? So one example is teacher retention and burnout, right? So there's a ton of edtech companies that have nothing directly to do with teacher retention and burnout, but making a product easy to implement, making sure teachers don't experience more frustration when they start using your product, when it doesn't, that it doesn't take 17 steps to be able to log in and get started, that it doesn't need 6 hours of professional development, right, to get familiar with it, just at a surface level. While it's not directly addressing that problem, it's recognizing this is real, this is what's happening out there for our customers, and we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is somehow supporting that, in some way. So I think staying in tune with I'm really customer-centric. So I think we can set ourselves up for success going forward to make sure that we're staying in touch with those priorities. And then I think listening to them, listening to our customers when they tell us something is too complicated, when they tell us something isn't, intuitive to use, when they tell us they, are looking for these certain requirements in order to move a potential proposal up to the board for approval. If we really listen to them, if we're really meeting their needs, even in all this uncertainty and with changes in funding and everything, I think that can still position edtech companies to be in the best position possible, because they actually understand their customers, and hopefully they're making the changes and responding to the things that they need, because otherwise you're just one of 200 emails they're getting each day, right? And that's not where anybody wants to be, right? You want to be an email. I think those are the two things that can really help them stay afloat, and to hopefully really grow and get a bigger reach in the market, and help them be more successful.
Well, that's I think to that point, it's one of the reasons why software as a service, which is kind of, if you're a tech founder, that's you're a lot of mindset is around, I want to be a SaaS company because the profit margins are high, but that whole model doesn't play in education, because there is such a high touch requirement, and you have to understand the market. They have to understand and trust who you are as well as your product. So it's really a tech plus service model. I don't know what the acronym would be, but it's different. It's not software as a service. It's service and software. So just kind of having that mentality shift that if you don't have people that can speak the language, whether they're partners like us or yourself, or they're your salespeople or frontline people that understand the classroom and the requirements and the pain points that are existing within those environments, because you just pointed out a bunch of them, and I think your teaching experience is so vital. As we have this conversation, from a classroom perspective, the challenges on a daily basis. I mean, we hear about it from an external point of view. Teachers are challenged. They're underpaid and overworked. But a lot of that's just kind of chatter. You have, real life experience. And so from sitting in that seat, if you're kind of going back to your teaching days and looking through that lens, how do you view it from there? And how can that inform edtech companies and what they're doing?
Again, I would just really encourage edtech founders and even, folks on the team, my own team, everybody went. Junior designers, assistant editor, everybody on my team had to get out into a classroom, some more frequently than others, right? But everybody had to understand what a kindergarten classroom looked like, what the dynamics in a middle school classroom looked like. And it made them better at their job. It helped them have more empathy and understanding that informed the product. And I think that is part of what enabled us to create products that people would hug us for. We were out visiting on campuses, and that's a great feeling. And I want to go back to what you shared. I love your acronym. You should coin that. It is service with software, with software alongside it, but it really is service first rather than being software forward, because I've heard that over and over again at conferences when superintendents and, again, district administrators, these big decision makers, when they're talking about what they're looking for in a solution provider, in particular edtech, they say over and over and over and over again, they have to understand who we are and what our priorities are, what's in our strategic plan. They need to really deeply understand education. Don't email me on the first day of school. Don't stop by on the first day of school and expect that, that I'm going to talk to you. It's the first day of school. It just doesn't work that way. So that, and they've said, we don't want to just turn over a PO and get access to something. They have shared, we want to have a partner who's going to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work right alongside us. If we're going to invest in an edtech platform, there's a huge curve to implementation and gaining buy-in. There's going to be teacher resistance because it's new and it's one more thing they have to learn. It feels like an extra added on top. Right, wrong, or otherwise, that's how they're going to feel. Why? Because there's probably a teacher shortage, and and there's social emotional challenges, and who knows what other challenges are already happening, and your platform isn't going to be top of their list. So the superintendents are really looking for partners, and that comes from that service, that relationship, and that trust that we can offer them, or not, but hopefully that's what we're going to be offering them. And I think that kind of speaks to where I was talking about really listening to them and understanding them. If we put them at the center and make the changes that they're asking for and answer the questions that they have and solve the needs that they have, that's going to put us in a great position. Otherwise, an idea is just an idea.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go forward, and we're going to coin EdSAS today. But it's EdSAS. There's not two A's. It's just education, service, and software. And so that's Conni and I
love it today. We're in. Let's trademark it. Do it.
But no, I thank you. And I could talk to you forever, Conni. I think this is a really wonderful conversation. I do want to throw you a little bit of a curveball and ask you top 3 resources, books, or conferences that you would recommend to someone in edtech that's trying to develop and accelerate into this marketplace.
Top 3 books, conferences, events. Goodness, there's a lot. I would say
just pick 3 things. You don't have to go through and make 3 for each of those categories. Just
3 things. Okay, so I'll say, ASU GSV is really the place for what's cutting edge and the movers and the shakers, and there's just so much great networking, and I think it's a really fun conference. On the flip side of that, staying a little bit more grounded, in particular for any instructional solutions, I think ISTE is a great conference. There's a really good mix at that conference, not only of solutions and resources out there on the floor, but a lot of great sessions and things that can help edtech founders keep more in touch with that. And then the other thing that I would say is, and I'll be a little more generic, but for wherever they are, either wherever they are based and located, or wherever one of their core states is, where they're focusing their marketing and sales, is to get out to one of the state conferences there. So if they are selling a science solution or a reading solution, go to the state conferences for that particular area of focus. If you have one in your state, it's a little more intimate. You're going to get a little bit closer to the market, and they can be, while they don't have the numbers of a national show, they can be really, really great places to have conversations and really kind of build your community.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. Thank you. And I would say one of the things that's kind of top of mind here right now is there's a shift from concepts, which is the basis for the EdGate taxonomy. When we do alignment, we base it on concepts, and that helps us to connect many states quickly. There's a shift going on right now from concepts to skills, and I want to throw that out there to the community, because if anybody's listening that's in ed tech, the transition to workforce is dramatic. I think we're going to see a lot of things happening. Students coming out of high school and going directly to workforce, and so this idea of how do we bake skills in to and not to say replace, but they should be at the same level as concepts, that students learn certain things, they learn certain skills, and then we can extrapolate out from there on what they need to learn to be effective in whatever they choose to do. So I just want to throw that out there. And any thoughts or comments on that, Conni?
Talk about innovation. I think workforce and anything beyond high school is really, there's a lot of change and transformation that can be happening in that space in particular. I think that whole area of the market is just primed for a huge transformation. And I'd love to see it myself. I have one college graduate, one in college and one in high school. I would love to see some new things happening out there in workforce and beyond K-12. So I look forward to hearing about that conversation.
Well, that's going to be an upcoming topic for sure. So Conni, thank you for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. If someone wanted to get hold of you, how would they do that?
Well, they can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Conni, Conni, Francini, Francini. So they both end with an I, makes it easy to remember. Connect with me on LinkedIn or visit the website. It's clarityconsultinginc.com.
Wonderful. Conni, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Rich.